your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday. And what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million pounds. And they're different, right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country, to be fair. Different countries have different tax laws, so with different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Happening. My name is Jorge Shaft, and I am here with Relaks Radio, talking about all the sort of things that happened this past week. I've decided, in this, while the other people were chatting, that I'm actually going to kind of slightly break the sort of order that I gave topics to Jamie, and I've decided I'm going to go to a reverse order of how I normally do these shows. And normally I start very kind of British focused stories and then expand outwards. I'm going to do the opposite because I've talked about, Afghanistan, thousands of miles away, very far away story. But then I'm going to shift over now to talk about the story in the Americas, both because it's more exciting and also because I think there's something of importance to be discussed here. And the way I put it to Jamie, the editor, the lovely person who makes all of this work, is I said, everybody gets a hurricane. And that's because there's quite a few very scary hurricanes out there. At the moment, as I speak, the southwest of Mexico is being absolutely devastated by a tremendous sort of twister. It's going around destroying cities in 3 different provinces. There's been loss of life, apparently. Huge, terrible time for Mexico right now. This past week as well, beginning of the week, and I mentioned it was coming in the last episode, in New York, they had the Hurricane Henry, which caused pandemonium and chaos in New York City. But ultimately, it kind of surprised everyone because its main central trajectory ended up being in Rhode Island, where same thing, incredibly high winds, huge rainfall, lots of damage throughout the state. And just when you thought, okay, well, that's enough hurricanes to last us a week, then this past week, there was a pretty scary story from the Caribbean where a sort of new hurricane is emerging. It's going straight for a beeline course to hit the great state of Louisiana. And they've called it Hurricane Nora, which should really kind of ring an alarm bell in your head because the kind of naming convention of hurricanes is sort of the superstition, at least, is to go, oh, hurricanes named after men are the weaker ones. They're the ones that kind of, they do damage, they do destruction, but, ultimately, it's you can prepare for them. Hurricane Nora is what they call a Category 1, which is the like the biggest, scariest, most horrendous hurricane you can have. It's barreling straight for Louisiana with a woman's name, which is the tradition of, oh yeah, we expect this to go really bad. And if you think like in the past, sort of past hurricanes, whose like names have been taken off the list of names you can put on because of like how destructive they were, you find names like Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, big, terrible storms that caused loss of life and massive property damage. So much so that's like, yeah, we will remember this name forever. And most of them are all the women's names. So it's pretty alarm bells, isn't it? It's pretty, oh boy, if you live basically anywhere near the sea in the New World, you better be boarding up all of your windows and, praying to whatever God you believe in, because it looks like that God is about to punish you with a giant storm. Though I think, to be honest, anybody who's like listened to me for 5 minutes knows exactly what I'm going to say next. I'm going to say that this is a predictable thing that we knew was going to happen for quite a long time now. It's climate change. Everything's been going pretty much exactly as scientists said they was going to happen. Pretty for certain, with like pretty certain knowledge, like, yeah, this is a thing since the 40s, and speculated on and, quite reasonably sort of predicted as a potential problem. I remember reading, and for some reason, when I always think of this one sort of story that I once read, it was an article that was a letter to a newspaper that could have been written yesterday. It was talking about, yeah, so, we burn lots of coal in like our industry. We know that doing this creates carbon dioxide, which in laboratory experiments tends to heat up the, all of the kind of equipment. And we know for certain, like, yeah, this carbon dioxide like has a heating greenhouse effect, on all the sort of vessels, and we're worried that this will happen to the planet if we keep doing this. Written 1902. It was like pre-World War One, in that sort of era. It's like even then, scientists would, and it was signed by dozens of scientists, just writing to the Times, I believe it was, going, yeah, this is something we've noticed. This is something kind of scary. Maybe we should sort of think about this and deal with it. And 100 years later, we've done nothing. Yay. To these exact situations. Huge hurricanes, very, very destructive, very scary named hurricanes, making repeated landfall on the United States and in Mexico. I mean, just this week, there was also a story about how sort of Germany marked the 1 month, I believe it was, anniversary of the huge storm and floods that took place there, which killed 180 people in Germany last month. I know, right? Makes you think, like, it's been a month already. But we'll discuss that. It's scary for another time. But it was just, and along with the huge loss of life, of course, there's thousands of people injured. Whole towns were sort of submerged underwater. My own family, actually, a lot of them live in Luxembourg, and their house got flooded. And I remember talking about it at the time with both of them and on Relaks Radio, which is like, hey, yeah, no, how's the sort of, how's the basement? And it's like, yeah, it's all flooded, and there's just been like this torrential storm that just dumped a year's worth of water on us in like 5 seconds. And you can only expect to see this become more common. Let's be real. Scientists have been saying, oh yeah, climate change is going to cause more storms and cause more extreme weather events for a while now. and now we're seeing it in action. I believe this hurricane season is even like on course to be one of, if not the sort of fiercest ones on record. And it's a pity that people will have to go through this. Do I have solutions? Well, I've repeated those as well. I think that we should drastically cut down on CO2 emissions. I think that we should, take climate change seriously, as bogus as that sounds. I've even been tending to think, could this be an excuse or like a legitimate reason to sort of, drastically reform the political institutions? And maybe there's a case for it. But what else is there to say? Huge storms, lots of damage, loss of life is skyrocketing again and again through all of these extreme weather events. And we know why it's happening, and we know what to do to lessen it or stop it. And yet we refuse. We just don't. And I mean, I saw yesterday the Extinction Rebellion. They had like a protest, and I watched an Extinction Rebellion protester walking around with the stickers, which was great, but what's it going to do? What do you think? Let me know in the comments of this live stream. And I look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon after some other people have a chat. They might have some strong opinions on climate change as well. So we'll be very, very attentive, I'm sure, to listen to what they have to say. See you soon.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much has changed, especially